New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
And hello again, dear ones. Rev Briz with you over here.
Rev Z right here.
Hey, Rev D right here.
And this is New Thought today for Tuesday, December 19th, 2023. We're so grateful that you have chosen to be with us today, whether you're watching live or on a rebroadcast. Feel free to chime along, chat along, and let us know you're out there. And my dear brother, Reverend LZ, and I are together with our dear friend and special guest and somebody who we've been working to get on this program for a while now, Rev D, also known as Reverend Dr. Deborah Johnsonnn. Rev, welcome aboard.
It's good to be here.
We are grateful.
Good things are worth the wait. I know this is going to be good.
Yes.
Exactly. And I can say I can't remember a conversation I've had with you that didn't get really good at some point in time along the journey. So we're really grateful you're with us. And we always love to kick it back to our guests and say, you get to introduce yourself. So if you don't mind, share a little bit with our audience. Let them know a little bit more about who you are and what brings you to New Thought today on this week.
Well, welcome everybody. Let's just take a breath, huh? Ooh, let's just take a breath and be present. Well, I'm really, really grateful to be with you. I have been in the New Thought movement for a really long time. I got started in college in the 70s and have had just a wonderful, wonderful journey in it. I am one of the founding members of the Agape International community in Los Angeles. And I modeled after Agape, my ministry that's in the Santa Cruz area about 27 years ago now. And I've just been taking that consciousness everywhere. I'm a big, big social justice activist. I'm very pleased to have received the first New Thought Walden Award for spiritually guided, activism. And one of the newest things I'm involved in is a new nonprofit organization called Unleashing Our Future, which is all about helping us to develop the capacities, the compassion, and the connection to do this transformative work that we're all talking about. How do we practically put it in to motion with large groups of people who are not necessarily in our spiritual, genre?
Yes, absolutely. And I think you hit on a very, very important point right there. And one that we love to explore here on this program is how do we get to those people that are outside our circles? Because it's real easy for the people that already know the New Thought philosophy to go, oh yeah, I get that. I understand that. I enjoy, I'm on board with you. And so we'd love to hear a little bit more of what this newness is that's coming forward for you and how you see that playing out.
Great. Love to. So, my grandmother used to always say that there really is nothing new under the sun. So let me not try to take credit for some great new idea that, as we know, matter is neither created nor destroyed. It only changes form. So there are some new forms that are trying to come forth.
Mhm.
I believe that the new quote unquote denomination, so to speak, isn't so much along a ecclesiastical hierarchical kind of a situation where you just have the same group of people who are coming together and where all of your sort of spiritual guidance and sustenance and activism is just within this group. I really think that what the world is calling for now is a network where
Mhm.
we are cutting across and we are involving not just spirituality, but we're involving things like social justice and activism, environmental regeneration, where
Mhm.
we're looking at things like a wealth empowerment. And much to your credit, like you're doing here around now, taking a much greater responsibility for the information dissemination as well. Because uh, living in a world now where we're just bombarded with stuff, but it isn't necessarily accurate, true, or uplifting and inspiring. So
Mm.
part of what my new organization is about is helping us to navigate through some of that and bringing together some of the best minds from science to sacred text to social media, because fewer and fewer people are going to like church per se these days. They're
Mhm.
getting their information from many different places, and we want to make sure that there's some nutritional food out there, and not just a bunch of social media junk food.
Right, right. Oh, I love that because one of the things that I'm finding, and oftentimes people say, "Oh, yes, with the young people," but it's not just with the old people, with the young people. It's some of the so-called older people as well who are relying on these very short stories, no matter where they come from, whether they're on social media or from a so-called legitimate news source. they
Yes,
they don't want to be seen on the social platforms, but they create the articles and the information that they give you to digest in that same kind of format. And so
yes,
you get it and you go out with this little quick quip kind of language that you can say a little phrase and everybody's catchy. But when you dig deeper at the details, they're not substantiated by anything. It's all
right.
suspect. And I love that idea of that we have to begin to be students of the game again, as they say. We have to study this stuff. And like when we were in college, they gave us math, science, social studies, psychology for us to blend that information and see where the intersections are, so we come
Yes.
up with better answers and better previews of what to do in a certain situation. So I love that idea.
Yeah, if you think of it, it's much like the educational environment. It used to be you just came to school, you sat at a desk, um, and it was, like very rigid, very prescribed. And we find that that isn't the way that learning happens the best or the
Mhm,
most. Well,
mhm.
it's the same thing with our spiritual education, that the idea of just, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with going to church, but just going to church, sitting in the pew, or sitting in the chair, and leaving and doing that every Sunday, that's not enough these days.
Right.
So part of our challenge is how do we learn to diversify our message?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not just talking about platforms, I'm talking about the very language itself. How can we say things in ways that are relevant, not just across age, but that are relevant across culture,
Mhm.
or that are relevant against theological perspectives?
Yes.
Because for some people, the word God just like gives them Tourette's. And 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 learning how to say that without saying the word God.
Yeah.
I've been a consultant for decades, and when I'm doing corporate environments, I'm just amazed at all the different ways I have to come up with to say things. So it's going to be a closed eye exercise.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
or sneaking in there, like some kind of way, dress it all up.
Yes. And by the time they swallow it, it's like, oh, that tastes like what was that?
I use the image of a little pink dinosaur, like to get the kids to take the vitamins.
Yes.
You can't tell them that it's calcium and riboflavin and just make it look like a little pink dinosaur.
What? Go ahead, Robert.
Well, I was just gonna say, I love you're drawing the analogy to school and to the learning process and education, because my kids don't have textbooks anymore. They don't have lockers in school, and everything is delivered in a new and different way. And so the educational process is in some way contributing to the shorter attention span. They buy into the shorter messaging and the hot takes rather than the deeper understanding of a topic. Yeah. However, that's what is. And I still find in far too many spiritual communities, we're teaching the same old stuff from the same old authors with the same old arguments versus looking at new ways and new materials and newer understandings of how the philosophy transcends the time in which it is recorded.
Exactly.
But we're studying 60 and 80 and 100-year-old authors when we got plenty of examples in the 10 to 15 to 20-year author range, right?
Yes. Yeah. And, I'm all about the and. I really am. I don't think that we need to trade one for the other. So, like, even when we're talking about the authors, is that yes, they're very good contemporary authors, and they're also good authors from thousands of years ago. Yeah. And what I try to do is to help bridge that gap. I was joking before about how there really is nothing new. That it helps for people to be able to locate themselves and say, yeah, with so-and-so, this hip hop artist is saying this or that. Hey, but do you know who else said that? and did you realize that that's a concept that comes up in all these other traditions? Because everybody wants to belong to something. And I think it's going to be a challenge for us not to get so trendy that we lose our depth. Yes. Okay. And we know that spirituality, in terms of your spiritual growth and deepening, it is a process. I don't care how instant people want it. You don't get to like instant enlightenment. But I think that we can learn ways to do it, just like athletics or something. If people really like the sports, they'll do the drills. They'll show up for the practice. They'll dedicate themselves, to it. But they have to be able to be motivated to be able to do that. And I think that's part of our challenge now, is to deliver our message in ways that motivate people to not just run away with the little, I used to call it like the Deborah McNugget. They're make Deborah nugget. No.
Yes.
But how make them want a full meal, even if you got to give it to them in courses.
You bring up an excellent point there when you talk about the athletes, right? Because there was a time, and it kind of feeds right into the inclusion and diversity piece that I think we have to make sure that's always present, is that there used to be a time when a football player would not even consider going to a ballet studio and learning how to stretch, or going to a yoga studio to learn how to breathe, let's say, just as an example. But now they understand this cross-pollination, if you will, of how the inclusion and diversity of these different forms of athleticism,
yes,
can benefit the whole entity that's participating in a certain thing. And so now you get ballet trainers, ballet practitioners who now lift weights, and then you get football players who now do ballet and yoga, because they understand that it is a wholeness process that has to take place. And if you get so stuck in one type of exercise, you set yourselves up for repeated injuries and lack of development and other aspects of the body that you need to be the best athlete you can be. So I love that from our spiritual perspective.
Exactly. And what you're saying ties in just what I was talking about the network. So like
Yes.
even in athletics, people are realizing that they can't just live in a world of just pure athleticism and be as great as they can be. They have to network. They have to network through what are some other systems? What are some other ways of doing it? What are some other ways of stretching? I remember because I was born and raised in LA when Phil Jackson, who was head of the Lakers for many, many years, started having the Lakers meditate.
Yes.
And people thought that was like crazy, but he was focused. He'd say, like, let the game come to you. Let the game come to you. And this is what we need. We need to be like a cross-pollination infusion.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of what I'm working on now.
Oh, nice. And one thing I know for your work, you had a center, and now you released that and gave it to some other uses that are wonderful and great. How do you see now this new ministry, not just yours but everybody's, where there are no more walls, and the pews are slowly slipping away, and so I'm just curious in terms of your insight on that.
Well, we had 3.5 acres, 15,000 square feet, 600 seater.
Wow.
We had 22 toilets.
Wow.
In an old building.
The senior minister knows that why.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Cleaned every one of them, I'm sure, at one time or another.
So, or they're always breaking. So we collectively decided that we would release the property. It was going to need, when we bought it, it was in bad repair. I say we were Lazarus. We raised it. We got another 20 years out of it.
Yes.
And now it's being turned into a 3-story, 70+ bed senior assistant living facility.
Nice.
And we're very, very pleased with that because there's such a housing shortage in the Santa Cruz area. So along with that idea of the networking, so we have office space now. We have office space that has some meeting space in it and a little kitchen, our storage and whatnot. That is, our base. We can come together when we need to do things. But we have teamed up with other organizations. So, for example, our food bank, we still distribute about 8,000 pounds of food every week. And we've teamed up with one of the other churches, which honestly was a surprise to me because they're pretty hardcore fundamentalist group. And it's been working out beautifully where they have their food bank on Tuesdays. We have ours on Thursdays. Wow. We have all our same people. We set it up like a farmer's market, and we have storage space and whatnot on their facility. When we have our larger events, there are certain places that we go that are more community-like events. So there's, once again, more like interaction, and we're not being as much of the standalone independent church that we were.
Yeah. And I think that's once again, Rev D, you're ahead of the curve, in my opinion, because Z and I have been having these conversations, and I've been seeing it coming for a while. We have to be more, the building itself, the place, the space has to be more community oriented, and then allow the mission to find its way to people, rather than being a place that you go to get the science of mind, where you go to get healed, where you go to get something. It becomes more of a place where it's not about the philosophy or the church. It's about the people, and it's about that sense of community that then if they want to learn a little bit more about New Thought, sure, we can talk to you about that too.
Yeah,
exactly. You know, and this isn't something that we just started. You know, we've always been this way, where because we had such a large facility, you know, many groups would come and, you know, meet and rent space with us and all of the rest of that. So we had really had that, you know, in our consciousness, but the logistics, the finances, you know, we found, as I've talked to so many other senior leaders, saying the same thing, that so much of our attention and so much of our money was going to facilities, was going to building and, you know, maintenance and management and all of the rest of that, that we wanted to take those precious resources and put it in our ministry, you know, put it in our messaging, you know, spend our time, you know, doing that. So we do our Sunday morning service now virtually, but we have teamed up with other congregations so that people who want the in-person Sunday morning experience, you know, go there. There's a lot of, you know, going back and forth with each other with the local Santa Cruz religious science church that I had first started off with. There's ways that we do this, and we have found that afternoons work. So we're doing something in the afternoons where we get together, you know, with our band and you know, rock out and have a good time and fellowship, where it doesn't have to be just in the morning.
Yeah.
Right.
And you know, one thing I hear you saying, it takes me back, and I'll probably touch a little bit of your childhood too, in that there used to be a such thing as a rec center, right?
Yeah.
And at the rec center, you could go and you could play basketball, or you could go learn to crochet, or you could just go hang out and play bumper pools. But there was this one facility that was utilized to enhance or introduce people to different things. And what I see in the future is, in that same model you're describing, as our centers have to become rec centers where multiple people are using the building. They're different. There's piano classes going on, and there's, you know, tutor programs. There's some elder care maybe, and that coalition of organization and individuals begin to create an offering, if you will, that allow them to be a beacon in the community. Because right now, like you said earlier, oftentimes we're preaching to the choir. We're not a beacon. We're just a candle. And we need to become a beacon.
And you know who really does that well? The larger fundamentalist churches.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
They do that really well. Yeah. They have the rec center with the basketball court and the volleyball court or whatever. And they're not focused on the teenagers of their congregation. Okay. They're just focused on teens, period. Yeah. You know, and you get the pizza and you get the this, you know, you get the this and the that, or, you know, there's the pancake breakfast, or, you know, there's all of these, the AA clubs, you know, there's all these different things that are services to the community, and they bring you in.
Right.
They bring you in. So anybody that has a space, I want to really encourage you to make your space more of a communal space. Yeah. And there's something else that's really popular. I know we do a lot with the largest Jewish community in Santa Cruz, you know, Temple Bethel. And there's a lot of this hybrid stuff going on between synagogues and centers for spiritual living, and New Thought churches. I know Agape meets at the Saban Center, which is a Jewish synagogue in Los Angeles. The local church in Santa Cruz, the Centers for Spiritual Living, now houses one of the smaller Jewish communities, you know, in town. And there's very good chance that we're going to have Easter Sunday morning at a Jewish synagogue.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. And
I'll know by this afternoon whether that's sealed, signed, sealed, and delivered.
Oh, nice. And that's what when I think about my introduction to New Thought and ancient wisdom, and I look back across the ages, those individuals and organizations that were I'll say really, but not trying to in a demeaning way, but those organizations and individuals that were really trying to create a platform for humanity to shine and grow and work through things, they were very flexible. They were rigid, if you will, on their belief that there was a power that we could pour into and it would pour back into us. But how that worked and what kind of container I need to bring to the well was varied. And we have to begin, I think, just like you're describing there, to do that. I love that. I have to wait and see how that looks. That's going to be perfect.
And
Well,
if I may say, can I say one more thing on this?
Yes.
Yeah, please.
I find that a lot of times in New Thought, people are running from their Christian roots, the Christian roots of the theology.
Yeah.
And I'll hear comments like, "Oh, I'm a recovering Catholic," or, jokes about Jesus,
Yep.
or that kind of stuff. And I want to tell you right now that from a cultural diversity standpoint, that ain't cool. I mean, it's just not. Because
Right.
just like you might have somebody who's culturally Jewish, but not like religiously Jewish, well, it's that same way that, in the Black African American community, it's Jesus.
Yeah.
Now there may be people who are Muslim and, doing Buddhism and whatnot, but you cannot badmouth Jesus. You
Right.
you can't do that. Or Latinos, Latinx people being culturally Catholic.
Yeah.
And there's a way in which we will put on a pedestal Buddhism or Hinduism or something like that and go around the world to commune with somebody, but we don't want to deal with the Baptists down the street. And I'm just saying, we really have to, if we're gonna grow and survive and be diverse, we have to stop being haughty and feeling like somehow or another our spirituality is above some other people's spirituality.
Now, Rev D, I've heard you speak to this before and in other settings, and it's really made me aware that we in New Thought, there can be a tendency to bash on the places we say we've escaped from, or the places we say we're recovering from, and I've personally said, all right, well, that's a new place to take a stand. As a new place, kind of lovingly take someone and say, hey, not calling them out in public, but being able to have that conversation that says that's not really what we teach, and that's not really what we envision for the future. If you need to heal from it, but let's not bash about it.
Well, that's true. But the point that I'm trying to make is it isn't just a question of healing from it, but reconciling with it. You cannot pick up Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science, and read 2 pages without him saying Jesus somewhere in there.
Right.
The Fillmores, Mary Baker Eddy, all of these people, they were Christian mystics. That's how they started. Okay. And a house divided against itself cannot stand. I'm not saying that you have to continue in that vein, but just like from a cultural standpoint, if your people are from a certain place, if you are against that or ashamed of it or feel like you want to disassociate yourself from it, you're going to have a problem. If your folks were farmers, they were farmers. If your folks were from over here, that's what they were. And that's in you, that's in your consciousness.
Yeah.
And we have to stop putting it down, because when we put it down, we're not getting the value out of it. I know for certain, because I grew up in LA. Religious science started 6 blocks away from the Pentecostal movement at the exact same time. And I had a chance to study at headquarters at religious science. And Ernest Holmes used to go there all the time and watch these faith healers. And he was just so fascinated trying to figure out what was that they were doing.
Yes.
What was that they were doing?
Yeah.
But he was regularly hanging out there.
Yeah. Well, you know, and that's because I've had Black friends, African American friends of mine who've come to the center, and they said, yeah, the message was good and the people were nice and friendly, but that music, we got to do something about that music, right? Because from the Black church perspective, you know, people come to hear the music, they stay for the message, right? Because in our tradition, that music was something that elevated the spirit, that opened you up to a different frequency, a different vibration. And so there was this opportunity to marry the head and the heart. But and the heart had to come first, right? And if it's in any kind of reverse order, for most Black Christians, they begin to pump the brakes a little bit until you can kind of, you know, wrestle with that internally and make it work.
No, it's true. It's true. And what I find, I know in my church, I was very plain. It's like, you've got to give me the music. You know, when I first moved to Santa Cruz, I think the Black population was like 2%. I think it might be like 0.2% now. It's like, you have to give me the music.
Yeah.
And you know, we developed one of the best choirs around. We went to Carnegie Hall and Monterey Jazz Festival, you know, all kinds of places. But to your point is that it goes to the cultural thing again. And what I find is that there is music that has a certain resonance, This reminds me of a discussion. This was decades ago when I was doing consulting for the Los Angeles Gay and Lesbian Community Services Center. And they were putting on this women's event. It was in June, and it was going to be a pool party. And I'm, you know, assisting them and helping them do their outreach and all that. And I said something like, well, where's the dancing going to be? And they said, dancing? I said, well, yeah, it's a pool party in June, you know, like, where's the dancing going to be? And they told me the artists that they were going to have. And I just shook my head and said, oh no, you got to have some music up in here, some dancing. And and this older white woman said, I reckon Deborah's got a point. She said, because if the Black women have fun, we'll probably all have a little more fun.
Yes. Yes. And you know, culturally, that's a thing. You know, I remember when Reggie White became a minister, and he may not have been the most eloquent about it, but he was highlighting these same things, that certain cultures, it has not the people, but the culture has a real affinity and a real skill in doing certain things. Mm-hmm. And that we have to begin to recognize that, so that we can bring a whole, you know, to have a sweet potato pie without any sweetener in it is going to not be a pie that anybody going to touch. You got to have a little bit of sugar and butter in that sweet potato pie. And we have to begin to look at that in a humanistic way, so that we, you know, everybody partakes of the pie.
Yeah. Well, you know, folks, Elzia just did it. He talked about food, which means that we got to take a break, because we got to find ourselves some sweet potato pie now. And we need to give just a moment to our sponsors, let them say a little bit more and say hello, as well as give our guests just a minute of a break to grab a little sip of water. But please don't go away. We're going to be back with more of New Thought Today and Reverend Dr. Deborah Johnsonnn in just a moment. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we're back with more of New Thought Today here on the New Thought Media Network. So grateful that you're with us, folks. Thanks for being a part of what we're doing here today. And we are having a great conversation with Reverend Dr. Deborah Johnsonnn, lead minister. I think that might be your title. I forgot to look up your titles. I apologize. But with Interlight Ministries, and you can find her over there on their website, Interlight Ministries, as well as revdnow.com, and we'll make sure we put that up on your screen as well. So Rev D, we always like to ask all of our guests and you've been doing a great job of this thus far, because I think we didn't even get started with the basics. We just dove into the deep end of the pool here today. And I love how that happens. So, but if you would articulate for us a little bit more, what do you, as you mentioned, you've been in New Thought a while. You've been a voice, a thought. You have been an inspiration, and you have helped to mold this philosophy over the last we'll just say a whole bunch of years. So what do you see happening in the future? Where do you see it heading? Where is the movement taking up? Where do we have to grow into? What's next for New Thought as a whole?
Well, some of it I've said, which is that I think that we need to stop thinking just so much in like an ecclesiastical sort of just purely spiritual way per se, and to realize that we need to be in fellowship and network and collaborate with many different kinds of groups. I would say that there's an evolution that's taking place. When you look at the early New Thought movement, one of the things that I've taught a number of years in some of the New Thought seminaries is about the history of the New Thought movement. And like the roots of the United States, was very individualistic.
Yeah.
And many of these leaders first came into it from the standpoint of healing, particularly physical healing. And there's a way in which we have been evolving, I would say, over time, from our emphasis being on just like your personal inner growth and healing and responsibility, to a place where we're more engaged in the outer community. We're assuming more responsibility for collective consciousness not just individual consciousness. And I think this is a growing trend, and I think that it needs to continue. I know that there's a lot of debate in some of our New Thought communities about what's quote unquote political. And is this, too political to get into?
Yeah.
And I just would like to say that we sometimes mix up the idea of separation of church and state with separation of spirituality and politics. You can do the former, but never the latter. Never. That every politic is based upon a world order view about what's the natural order of things. What is our relationship to each other? What's the highest and the best way for us to be in community? Who's supposed to lead? Who's supposed to follow? Are we of equal value, or not? All of these are profoundly spiritual things. And even if we look at the preamble to the Declaration of our Independence, you can't get much more spiritual than that. We hold these truths to be self-evident, endowed by our Creator. Now, I'm not saying they believed all of it, but it was saying that it wasn't the government, that our rights and that who we were and our powers, that there was something transcendent of that.
Wow.
So I confer that it is our responsibility as spiritual beings to make sure that our spiritual values are being actualized, and furthermore, that the energetic frequency of being a spiritual being has to be first and foremost. A lot of divisiveness that we're seeing out there now in our political arena is because we're fighting about stuff. We're fighting about facts. We're fighting about partisanship. We're fighting about cultural things, and our energetic frequency is getting lower and lower and lower, so that we're vibrating at the level of the problem instead of being causation itself. And I just want to put that challenge out to everybody who's listening to this now. Stay upstairs in consciousness. I know we're trying to feel like, well, I don't know how it's all going to work. We don't have to know how it's all going to work out. Yeah. That's the wonderful thing about prayer, is that we don't have to micromanage the universe. You just speak the word for healing. You speak the word for wholeness. You speak the word for truth. And now is the time for us to speak the word. Speak the word for justice. Speak the word for unity. Speak the word for peace, and not cower down because we are too afraid that we're going to get out of a little spiritual box.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, there's so much to unpack there. But one thing I heard clearly when we were talking about the church and state, or church, religion and politics, is that one of the things New Thought espouses is that we look at ancient wisdom. And when we go back and look at ancient societies, not all of them, but most of them had a council, and they operated from a council, so that when there was a chief spokesman or a leader or someone who was the mouthpiece, if you will, but when there were decisions to be made, or there were directions or processes to put in place, they had the council together, where they got different inputs from different people with different specialties or different insights into a situation. And as you were saying, the individuality that is seems to be the primacy of this environment has people operating from that perspective, although they're saying one other thing. They're saying we're looking at community, but it seems to be as more individual. And I think when we can speak into consciousness the idea of community, and everybody is participating. I love the idea of when you look at a rainforest, that there's a symbiotic relationship. There's an inclusion and diversity within that rainforest that keeps it not only alive and thriving, but creating new things spontaneously. And we have to begin to take that information from nature, God's perfect book, as I call it, and watch how it is resilient, it is creative, it is inclusive, and that when we can model that, I think we're gonna be, when we recognize, we'll be so far down the track, we'll be like, oh man, how did we get here?
I agree with you. I spent 3 weeks in the rainforest this summer. In in Ecuador at the Peruvian border. I think for New Thought specifically, and I want to use a little model that I use all the time. And it goes in with our theology that we believe that there's just one presence, there's just one energy field, that, like that's it. Everything is coming out of that. It is the whole. So just like you were talking about plants, okay? It's like there's a way in which all plants are the same. There's certain basic things. There's some ways in which some plants are like, not like other plants, but like some plants. And then there's ways in which every single plant is individually its own. Well, we're the same way as people. Okay, I call it level 1, where it's universal. There's some ways in which every person is like every other person. Level 2, there's some ways in which we're like some people and not like other people. And then there's some ways, level 3, where we are an individual. It's like there's subsets of the same thing, like no other person. New Thought wants to hang out in 1 and 3. New Thought wants to hang out in the way in which we are universal, we're all the same, or each of us is our own unique individual. And I've noticed in New Thought that there is a fear. There is a fear of this idea that there's ways in which we're like some people and not like other people. That's where culture comes. That's where diversity comes. It's so curious to me because I've been a diversity consultant trainer, for decades, that everybody wants to talk about diversity, but they fear difference.
Yeah.
They are so afraid that if we talk about diversity, then we're going to find out that we're not all the same, and that the idea of difference means division in their minds.
Yes.
Okay. So the way to not get into division is that we don't talk about any of our differences. And I contend that part of the challenge of New Thought is going to be, how do we hold all three? How do we hold all three? And that's not just a social justice issue. That's a deep theological issue because we believe that's how the universe operates. So we can't just hang out in 1 and 3, but how can we celebrate and find complementary synergies in the differences? How can we learn to not be afraid of these? Because we have gotten into this idea to be different means you're somehow opposed, and if you are opposed, you are my enemy. We were talking about sports just a moment ago. If you're a basketball player, the other people on your team, they're not your opponent. They may be your opponents, but they're not your enemies.
Right.
You're playing the same game. And in politics now, if somebody's on the other team, they're our enemy, as opposed to just on the other team, but we're playing the same game. And, right after the game ends, they're all hugging each other and they're whispering in each ear, it's about where the party's about to be. Go to the locker room, take a shower. Hey, and I'll see you later. And we have to be able to get to that kind of oneness mentality where we don't have to have everybody doing everything exactly the way that we're doing it, seeing spirituality exactly the way we're seeing it or whatnot. and feel threatened.
Yeah. You know, as you was describing that, I was thinking about when you're talking about energy, I was thinking about a battery, right? When you have a battery, there's a positive end and a negative end in terms of charge. And you have to have both of those to get any juice out of that battery. And
Exactly.
so we're running around trying to be one or the other end of that polar opposite that works together as one, and we create a mess.
Exactly. You know, there's this symmetry. There's a yin and a yang. You know, it's like the bird, the aerodynamics. The left wing's not going anywhere without the right wing. It's the same thing, and they're pointed different directions. One of the things that I presented at the Parliament of the World Religions a few months ago in Chicago was this same concept in regards to gender.
Yes.
That there is a masculine and feminine in everything in the world, including our own selves and our own biology, and that in order for us to be more whole, we have to be able to embrace all of us.
Yes.
And as a board member of the affiliated New Thought Network, I think I would be quite remiss if I didn't remind people that you can head over to Anton's YouTube page and find a really in-depth dive, because Reverend Deborah was one of their Thought Leader Thursday guests recently, and did a much, much deeper dive on this entire topic, which I want to again say, every time I think I watch what you do, Rev D, I feel like we're sitting at the foot of a master, because you have a way of making very, very what can be confusing topics. You have a way of bringing things together that help us to see this really is a game of oneness. We really are working together. This really is happening in a way that's calling everyone to their greatness, and not just, hey, this is working for you personally in this moment.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. Because one thing I'm going to pour a little love on Doc too, in that, you know, in the beginning she was talking about how you get this information out, and one of the best ways when we look at all the masters, which I would definitely put her in that stead, is that when they may give you the principle or the concept, but then when they want you to get it, they give you an analogy or a story so that you can see yourself in it and not have to be so much in your head. You know, you drop it in there, but then when you see yourself in it, or you can make that analogy, it just goes boom. And I appreciate your ability to do that and get people to turn that light bulb on.
Well, thank you. You know, I appreciate you saying that. And this new organization that I'm part of founding, Unleashing Our Future, it's designed to be my legacy. It's to, you know, not just mine exclusively, but all of these models and courses and frameworks and things that I've been developing through the decades of having a forum and a platform so that people can come and they can learn. I'm finally just claiming what you just said as my mission in life and my purpose, which is part of the reason I've relieved myself of a lot of the administrative kinds of things, you know, that I was doing before, and saying, no, we're at a really critical moment. And to be able to have keen, razor focused ways of looking at things. And I'm not just talking about short snippets in terms of timing, but to pierce through all of the stuff.
Yeah.
And this is a critical moment in time right now. And I'm stepping up. So whatever your gift is, step it up. If you sing, sing. If you teach kids, teach kids. You know, whatever you do you now. and do more of it.
Yeah, as they say, there's no place to hide anymore. You got to bring your stuff now.
We got to bring our stuff. And so we're going to take another quick break and make sure we say thank you to our sponsors and our donors and everyone else that makes this all possible. But we're not done yet, because we're going to be back with our final thoughts in just a minute. Stay tuned, folks. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Please help us say thank you to our organizational sponsors, including the Hepperlin Foundation, Affiliated New Thought Network, International New Thought Alliance, Science of Mind Archives and Library Foundation, Center for Spiritual Living Denver, Center for Spiritual Living Midtown, New Thought Philadelphia, Planned Happiness Institute, Summit Center for Spiritual Living, One Heart Retreats, Center for Spiritual Living on the Lake, Unity Spiritual Center, Kitchener, Om Center for Spiritual Living, La Mesa, Satya Center, Center for Spiritual Living, North Jersey, Unity of Savannah, and Center for Spiritual Living, Seattle, as well as all of our individual donors. Thank you for making New Thought Media Network a place to be. Please come be you. And remember, like, share, and subscribe. New Thought Media Network, positively inspiring. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you to all of our organizational sponsors and individual donors that help us to share this mighty message and share this expanding, evolutionary, evolving, emerging, visionary philosophy out into the world. Rev D, it's been a great pleasure having you with us today. Will you come back sometime?
It is my pleasure, of course.
Right.
Anytime.
I know we would love to have you. And it means we're here, folks. It's time for final thoughts. We'll kick it over to Rev Z to get us started.
Wow. I think, one of the things that I'm going to walk away with that Dr. D just set off is to not only tell the story, but to be the story. We have to begin to be the story and to be the metaphor and to be the analogy so that people can see what it looks like, not just hear it, but see what it looks like and begin to allow that to be that flame in the dark that allows us to keep moving, where as the poem goes, I've been to places where there ain't been no light, but if there's a little candle there, we can keep following.
Beautiful. Yes. Thank you. Rev D, for you.
I'd say don't be afraid to mix it up.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be afraid of the differences. Let us humble ourselves so that we can learn from other groups and other traditions, and we're going to get a lot further when we partner with more people.
Yeah. Amen.
Yes, I agree with that. And it seems like we always come back around to the fact of we're talking about, from my perspective, part of the vision of this network. So don't be afraid to mix it up here at New Thought Media Network, folks. Get in touch with us. And more importantly, in today's conversation, what's kind of coming to me is there's a new thought inside New Thought, but it's not that new. It's been around. These ideas, these thoughts have been around for a while. And now is the time, and I think I heard you say this a few times today, Rev D, now is the time to activate. Activate these principles, activate this sense of community, activate this philosophy. Because if we are, and I believe we are, creating a world that works for all, that means activity. Get active.
Yes. Definitely. It's a pleasure being on.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us, folks. You can get in touch with Reverend D throughout any of her different websites. All the links are in the description of today's show. If you missed any of the ones that were going across the network, across the screen there, or feel free to send us an email, info@ntmedia.org. Until next time, we wish you peace and richest blessings. Bye now.
Happy holidays.